7 years of marriage. I gave birth to his children and became his free housekeeper. But on the day I miscarried, he just shoved money at me and told me to buy whatever I wanted. In his eyes, I was always just a materialistic woman who wanted money. Even worse, at our son's parent-child Olympics, he brought his mistress to take my place. Even my son joined her in calling me materialistic and money-focused, and my mother-in-law constantly criticized me for being from a poor background. But after I signed the divorce papers and disappeared, the father and son crazily searched for me. It's a pity that now, all I want is freedom and a life that belongs to me. The day after the miscarriage, my husband, as usual, tried to make it up to me with money. Do you want jewelry, stock, or East Side estate? I shook my head and handed him the contract by the bed. Like he had done countless times before with checks, he signed without even looking. When he caught sight of my calm expression, he suddenly laughed lightly. I thought you would want me to stay and comfort you. I didn't expect that after all these years, you're still so materialistic, only seeing money. I froze for a moment as I took back the contract. Then, I heard my son's childish voice. Dad, only now do you realize? Mom had to give you money to give birth to me. Now you still want to pay for the loss of my brother and sister. Lynn Auntie is better. She says love can't be bought with money. Yes, love can't be bought with money. So this time, it's not a contract, but a divorce petition. My fingertips touched the cold paper he had just signed. This is the last time, I softly told my son, Leo Ford. The 5-year-old Leo Ford tilted his face up, lips pouting. Last time when I was sick, you took care of me. Dad bought you a bag. You said the same thing. He paused, mimicking a tone I was all too familiar with and hated. Lynn Auntie is right. Mom, you're like this. You're just stubborn and can't change. My chest felt pricked by tiny needles, not sharp, but densely painful. Before Ethan Ford came in, I had already made up my mind to leave. But I couldn't bear to leave behind the child I brought into this world. Even though I knew he didn't love me like before, I still endured the pain in both body and heart, nagging him one last time. Sheehan, remember to wear more clothes when it's cold. You're allergic to mangoes. Don't sneak eat them again. Be careful when crossing the road. He impatiently pushed my hand away, frowning. Are you annoying? There's the housekeeper and Dad for that. Seeing that I was silent, Leo Ford got more worked up, hands on hips. Mom, promise me, today is the last time you cling to Dad. You can't use being mom as an excuse to control me. I looked at him, faintly smiling, pale and weak. Of course, from now on, you can do whatever you want. I won't control you, and I won't cling to your dad anymore. The room suddenly quieted. Ethan Ford, who had been silent by the door, finally spoke. What's with the temper? He furrowed his brows, his tone carrying his usual impatience, but also a hint of judgment. Be mindful of your words in front of the child. He always did this. Any reaction from me that exceeded his expectations, any that wasn't docile, would be easily dismissed as petty and immature. I'm not throwing a tantrum. I looked up and met his probing gaze, calm as still water. I'm just fulfilling my son's wish. Ethan Ford's brow furrowed deeper. He couldn't fathom my calmness. This feeling of losing control made him uncomfortable. Great. Leo Ford's cheers broke the silence. He hugged Ethan Ford's leg. Dad, can you take me and Lynn Auntie to the parent-child Olympics? I was slightly stunned. Ethan Ford always paid attention to boundaries. He had allowed Olivia Carter to take Leo Ford to amusement parks or movies, but activities like the parent-child Olympics, which required a parent to be present, he had never allowed her to step in. This was the basic respect he had given me as Mrs. Ford, but now, he looked down at his son's eager face and then at my calm expression. His hesitation quickly subsided. You just miscarried. You need to rest. I'll take Olivia Carter. I don't want Sheehan to be disappointed. He paused before adding, tell the assistant what you want to buy. This was his rare attempt at comfort. It was also, to a tool bought with money, an explanation, as if that were a favor. If not for that transaction 7 years ago, he needed a child to placate his grandfather, and I needed money to save my mother. A woman of my humble background would never have entered the Fu family's door. All these years, he had been more or less satisfied with me. Satisfied with my docility. And every time I showed any sign of grievance, his only way of compensating was money, as if money could erase everything. All right, I lowered my eyelashes. Ethan Ford stared at me, his gaze deep. Dad, hurry up. Leo Ford shook his hand. Ethan Ford's throat moved slightly, but he said nothing, turning with his son to leave. The door closed, cutting off the faint laughter from them and Olivia Carter as they met up. I staggered to the window. Downstairs, Leo Ford held Ethan Ford's hand with one hand and Olivia Carter's with the other, hopping and skipping. The sunlight outlined their figures walking side by side, harmonious like a real family of three. I returned to the luxurious cage called home. Holding on to my still aching body, I began packing. I opened the huge wardrobe, filled with the season's latest styles, jewelry sparkling in velvet boxes. These were the armor I wore so carefully, just to not seem out of place when standing next to him. In his eyes, they had become evidence of my vanity and vulgarity. Now, they were useless. I had already contacted a luxury consignment boutique service, and everything would be donated to an anonymous scholarship foundation. Ethan Ford would probably never know how his vulgar money had quietly changed the fates of some girls. I found the old suitcase I had tucked away at the very back, its edges worn. 7 years ago, I dragged it into this place. Now, it seems the only thing I want to take with me is this suitcase. As I cleared out those expensive clothes, a colorful, slightly old little robot rolled out from deep inside the wardrobe. I froze. It was the toy Leo Ford cherished the most when he was 3. He loved playing hide and seek with me, secretly stuffing it into my wardrobe. In his little voice, he seriously said, "Mom, protect it for me, okay?" Back then, his eyes were shining brightly, filled with stars, and all his heart and eyes were on me. My chest suddenly hurt, a deep ache. When did all this start to change? Was it when Margaret Ford repeatedly mocked me in front of the child, saying I was unworthy of being in their circle? Was it when Ethan Ford used money to dismiss me, subtly teaching our son that his mother only cared about money? Or was it the appearance of Olivia Carter, making me, this housewife, buried in daily chores with dreams long forgotten, seem even more useless and uninteresting? My heart felt like it was clogged with waterlogged cotton, and even breathing came with a painful, dry feeling. I bent down to pick up that dusty little robot. Just as my fingers were about to touch its cold plastic, my phone vibrated in my bag. It was a message from the Maplewood preschool group. The teacher shared a short video of today's Parent-Child Olympics. Without thinking, I clicked on it. In the video, Leo Ford was held high on Ethan Ford's shoulders, his little face flushed with excitement. And beside him stood Olivia Carter, also smiling brightly. In a 3-person relay race that required the presence of both parents, Olivia Carter stood in the place that should have been mine. Leo Ford held his dad's neck tightly with one hand, and with the other, trustingly took Olivia Carter's hand. He smiled so happily, a radiant joy I hadn't seen in a long time. In the background, other parents could be heard joking kindly. "Mr. Fu, Designer Lin, your family of 3 really works well together." Ethan Ford didn't refute it. At that moment, the cold light of the phone screen reflected on my face. I didn't pick up the little robot. Instead, I slowly straightened up. "Well, what's this now, playing at running away again?" A sharp voice rang out from the door. Margaret Ford, arms crossed, wore an unmistakable sneer. I didn't turn around, continuing to fold my old clothes into the suitcase. "What's wrong? Lost your voice? Wasn't it like this 3 years ago? Caused a huge ruckus. And in the end, didn't you come back, tail between your legs?" 3 years ago, Leo Ford had just learned to walk, and I was suffocating under the weight of this gilded mansion and the constant disdain. I mustered up the courage to tell Ethan Ford, "The child is born, the deal is done, I want to leave." His usually controlled emotions flared up that day. With a sweep of his hand, everything on the desk crashed to the floor. He grabbed my chin, his eyes cold and filled with disappointment. "Leave the child behind? You still call yourself a mother? I won't allow my son to grow up without a complete family." He even threatened me with the rest of my mother's medical expenses. At that moment, Leo Ford, who had just learned to speak, crawled over and clung to my leg. In a garbled voice, he called out, "Mom, hug." It was for that single cry that my heart softened, and I stayed. It also made him more convinced that I couldn't leave. So this time, I secretly got him to sign the papers. "Done?" I zipped up the suitcase and looked straight at her. My attitude choked her words. I ignored her and dragged my suitcase to the door. Just then, a sound came from the front door. The door opened. Leo Ford's little face was flushed, gleaming with excitement from the sports day. He held Ethan Ford's hand with one hand and Olivia Carter's, who was smiling sweetly, with the other. When he saw the suitcase in my hand, his smile instantly froze. Ethan Ford's gaze passed over the child and landed on the suitcase I was holding. He stepped forward and grabbed my wrist with enough force to hurt. "Sophie Chen." His voice held obvious displeasure. "What's this tantrum about? Packing up the things you don't need and getting rid of them. I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip tightened. Leo Ford visibly relaxed, then pouted, his tone filled with complaint. Mom, you're so boring. You promised to let Lynn Auntie take me, and now you're sulking. Olivia Carter stepped forward at the right time, her face full of just the right amount of concern and innocence. Sophie Chen, are you mad at me? I really only went to help as a friend, to accompany Leo Ford. Look, it's always like this. She forever used the friend card, like a magic shield. Everyone tacitly allowed her to overstep boundaries. And whenever I raised doubts, I was easily labeled as unreasonable or ignorant of their elite family's rules. But this time, I didn't want to play along with this charade. I firmly pulled my hand away from Ethan Ford's grip, my lips curling into the faintest smile. Miss Lynn, you're overthinking. You love helping people with their kids so much that you even want to take someone else's child to a parent-child Olympics. I can't thank you enough. The air instantly froze. Leo Ford hissed like a cat with its tail stepped on, his fur bristling. Mom, how can you say that? Ethan Ford's face darkened, his voice carrying a warning. Sophie Chen, watch your tone and your place. Olivia Carter is just helping, and this is how you treat her? Olivia Carter's eyes reddened, on the verge of tears, looking pitiful. Leo Ford angrily shouted at me. No wonder the little brother and sister are gone. It's because they didn't want a mom like you. A chill spread through my body, as if my blood had instantly frozen, a sharp cold running through my limbs. So, they do protect people, but that person isn't me. The doctor's words echoed in my ears. The miscarriage happened because my body wasn't properly cared for after giving birth to Leo Ford, combined with long-term emotional suppression, sadness. But now, my own son, because of others, was saying such vicious words to me. Ethan Ford snapped harshly. Sheehan, he turned to look at me, his tone the usual indifferent, trying to keep the peace manner. Children speak without thinking. Don't take it to heart. Children speak without thinking? How light those 4 words were, easily wiping away all the hurt. At that moment, Ethan Ford's gaze shifted past me and landed on the pile of expensive clothes cleared out in the living room, now seemingly discarded. The walk-in closet, half empty, looked especially lonely. A flash of genuine shock passed through his eyes. Olivia Carter followed his gaze, immediately understanding. She explained in a thoughtful tone. Mr. Fu, don't blame Sophie Chen. No wonder she was willing to let me go to the sports day today. She just wanted to clear out the old things, to make room for new stuff you're buying. Ethan Ford's suspicion vanished in an instant, replaced by a knowing. I figured as much. Look. Yes, this was the Sophie Chen he always understood, constantly chasing material wealth, filling the emptiness with luxury goods. He took out his phone and dialed the assistant's number with an unquestionable tone. Send over a set of the new season's collection. He looked at me, his eyes calm, carrying a patronizing, high and mighty air. Now, are you happy? Olivia Carter left. Leo Ford ran up to me, puffed up with pride. In a few days, Lynn Auntie has a design exhibition abroad, and Dad is taking me for a month. Mom, hurry and help me pack my things. In the past, I would have meticulously organized everything, making sure nothing was left out. But this time, I just calmly looked at the housekeeper waiting nearby. Maria Gonzalez, could you help? Leo Ford froze, seemingly not expecting this response from me. Ethan Ford came down from upstairs, paused for a moment, and walked over to me, silent for a while. His voice carried an unusual, rare attempt at reassurance. It seems like you haven't gone out for a while. Would you like to come with us? Leo Ford immediately stared at me, his eyes filled with reluctance. I slowly shook my head, my voice without a single ripple. No, thank you. Leo Ford sighed in relief. Mom, why would you go with us? You can't even understand the design exhibition. You only know how to wash clothes, tidy things, and cook. How boring. Ethan Ford's brow furrowed at this comment. He turned to leave, but then his steps faltered. He suddenly asked, his voice low. It's just, I haven't seen you paint in a long time. My heart trembled violently, as if something had collided with me unexpectedly. So, he remembered. In the early years of our marriage, there were fleeting moments of warmth in this cold, empty house, like a fleeting illusion. On sunny afternoons, I would set up an easel in the corner by the window. He would occasionally walk by, stop, and look at my paintings. Very lively, he once said. He even once rare enough to bend down, point at a color, and discuss it with me. Those were some of the few bright spots in my otherwise bleak and oppressive marriage. Until one day, I excitedly told him that my design had passed the first round of selections by a prestigious design company. I fantasized that maybe I could pick up my abandoned dreams again. That day, he looked unusually exhausted, rubbing his forehead, and asked me flatly, "Sophie Chen, what's the point of all this? Isn't the life I give you enough? Why do you have to go out and struggle to earn that little bit of money?" He paused, his voice cold. "You work hard for a year, and it might not even be worth a fraction of the small contract I sign in a day." All my excited words, all my dreams for the future, were suddenly blocked in my throat. Yes, in his controlled business empire, on the scale with which he weighs everything's worth, my dreams and talents seemed insignificant, not even worth mentioning. I silently packed away my painting supplies and hid all my design sketches. I locked them away, along with the version of myself that once harbored dreams, deep in a corner where no light reached. I stopped painting long ago. I lowered my eyes, hiding all the swirling, painful emotions inside. 3 days later, at the airport, I personally went to the car to see them off. "All right, this is where I leave you." Ethan Ford turned around, his tone casual. Leo Ford lazily waved his hand. "Goodbye, Mom." I stood there, watching them turn and merge with the bustling crowd. Ethan Ford walked a few steps, and for some reason, turned back and glanced at me. I calmly waved my hand, a faint, almost invisible, polite smile on my face. Once their figures completely disappeared into the sea of people, I walked towards the parking lot, opened the trunk. There, quietly resting, was my old suitcase. "Madam, what is this?" the housekeeper asked with a confused expression. "Going on a trip. Just to clear my mind." I dragged the suitcase into the noisy terminal. The giant electronic screens flashed flight information continuously. I looked up and my eyes briefly passed over the flight number Ethan Ford and Leo Ford would soon board. It was headed for a warm southern country, carrying them on their family of 3 trip with Olivia Carter. And I, calmly, walked towards a completely opposite gate. When the plane accelerated down the runway, eventually breaking free of gravity and soaring into the sky, I watched the familiar city skyline shrink below me, my heart feeling no sorrow, only clarity. "Goodbye, Ethan Ford." The plane adjusted its position, carrying me, unwaveringly flying towards a distant place that stood in stark contrast to their happiness, a place just for me. As the plane shot into the sky, Ethan Ford sat back in his large first-class seat, resting his eyes. However, the image of Sophie Chen standing outside the security check, smiling and waving, kept flashing in front of him. He suddenly opened his eyes, furrowing his brows. He realized with a start, he hadn't seen Sophie Chen truly smile in a long time. Not that shallow, cautious smile she'd give at social gatherings, but the one she used to wear when she was sitting on the sofa, painting, her lips involuntarily curling up. At that time, he would sometimes walk by, and that scene would seem pleasing to his eyes. But he never stopped to take a closer look. Yet just now, at the airport, she was clearly smiling. "Dad, look. Lynn Auntie did a magic trick for me." Leo Ford's excited voice interrupted his thoughts. Olivia Carter was laughing while performing a small trick for Leo Ford, and the child was giggling with joy. Ethan Ford looked at his son's happy face, the strange feeling in his chest temporarily suppressed. He gave Olivia Carter a perfunctory nod and returned to focusing on the unfinished electronic documents. Work was the field he knew best, where he felt control and stability. Ethan Ford gave a brief nod and his eyes fell back to the phone screen. During the days abroad for the design exhibition, his schedule was packed. Sightseeing, socializing during the day, and at night, returning to the hotel. Leo Ford, from playing too hard, caught a little cough. Ethan Ford finished his emails, walked over to his son's bed, and tucked him in. Without thinking, he said, "Remember to cover yourself with the blanket at night. Don't catch a cold." The moment he said it, he froze, realizing that this small piece of advice had always been Sophie Chen's job. Leo Ford, drowsy, mumbled, "Dad, you're starting to sound like Mom. Did Mom send you a message?" The words hit Ethan Ford like a stone dropped into a calm lake, sending ripples through his heart. He almost immediately picked up his phone, opening the chat with Sophie Chen. The last message was from the day of the miscarriage, with dozens of missed calls from her. He remembered that day. He had been in an important merger meeting, saw her call, and immediately muted it. Scrolling up, there were messages with every small detail of their life. About the child, about the house, about him, and his responses were always short. Got it, busy." She hadn't sent him a message in so long. An indescribable emptiness spread quietly in his chest. He immediately called the housekeeper. "Where is Madam?" There was a brief pause on the other end. "Madam said she wanted to travel for a while to clear her mind, and after leaving with you, she never came back." Travel? To clear her mind? Ethan Ford relaxed his grip on the phone slightly. Maybe she had mentioned wanting to travel many times before, but he always turned her down, citing work. Now, it was good that she was going to take a break. He tried to convince himself with that reasoning. He didn't ask any more questions. After hanging up, he leaned against the hotel room's floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the unfamiliar city lights. He had finally gotten some time off with no intensive work schedule. This sudden peace made him acutely aware of the void, the important thing missing from his life. That presence, always quietly taking care of everything for him so that he could immerse himself in work without distraction, was no longer there. This feeling of emptiness reached its peak when Leo Ford came down with a fever in the middle of the night. The child's face was flushed, weakly tugging at his sleeve. "Dad, I'm uncomfortable. I want to call Mom and ask where my medicine is, but Mom's phone isn't picking up." He immediately dialed Sophie Chen's number on his own phone. "The number you've dialed has been disconnected." The cold system message hit him like a bucket of ice water, instantly freezing his blood. It had been disconnected. She had cancelled her number. He immediately used his connections to investigate, and the response he got was cold and definite. The number had been cancelled several days ago. He could no longer stay calm. Ethan Ford immediately ordered his assistant to arrange for the earliest flight back to the country. He didn't even have time to pack properly, rushing to the airport with his sick son. Along the way, that ominous feeling grew stronger and stronger. When the plane landed, he almost rushed back home. He pushed open the door, and the house was eerily quiet. Everything seemed normal, luxurious, tidy. But he immediately saw what was different. Although the walk-in closet was still filled with newly arrived items, it felt strangely empty. All of her personal belongings, the things that carried her presence, were gone. Ethan Ford instinctively walked to the far corner, there, where Sophie Chen's worn-out old suitcase had once been. It was gone. His heart twisted, his voice tightening. "Where is the suitcase?" The housekeeper responded softly. "Sir, Madam left the day she took only that suitcase." Ethan Ford instantly remembered what she had said. "If one day I leave, I don't want anything. Just take that suitcase." Leo Ford, belatedly realizing something, called out in a choked voice behind him. "Mom, does she not want us anymore?" He was holding the old toy Sophie Chen had bought him, standing in the bedroom door. His small face was full of confusion and fear. Those words hit Ethan Ford's already shattered heart like a final blow. At that moment, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Mr. Fu? This is the county clerk's office. Your divorce petition with Sophie Chen has passed the cooling-off period, and the formalities have been completed. Please come pick up your divorce certificate when convenient." Divorce certificate. It was at that moment he realized. The document he had signed that day wasn't a compensation contract. It was the divorce petition. Ethan Ford held the thin yet heavy divorce certificate in his hand, sitting in the study for the whole night. At dawn, there was a knock at the study door. Margaret Ford entered, with Olivia Carter, who had been carefully dressed. "Chunzhou, I heard about Sophie Chen." Margaret Ford spoke calmly, even with a hint of relief. "Divorce is fine. She was never suited for our Fu family. You're familiar with Olivia Carter, and the Lin family is a good match for us. You two, leave." Ethan Ford's voice was hoarse but carried an undeniable coldness. Margaret Ford froze. "Chunzhou, I said, leave." He lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot, his gaze sharp like a knife, scanning Olivia Carter. "And you, Miss Lin, don't come again." Olivia Carter's carefully maintained smile shattered instantly. She stepped forward unwillingly. "Mr. Fu, our families have been friends for generations. Over this time, both you and Leo Ford have come to like me, haven't you? A marriage between the Fu and Lin families is the best choice for both." Ethan Ford interrupted her. "Leo Ford likes you, so I allowed you to get close to him, that's all." Olivia Carter's words reminded him of many years ago, when his parents were also arranged for a similar marriage. A marriage of equal social standing that ended with his father's tragic death and his mother fleeing the country. He despised these relationships bound by interests, and even more, he hated someone trying to replace Sophie Chen's place. "I don't plan on replacing my wife." Olivia Carter's face turned pale. Under Margaret Ford's disapproving gaze, she finally left in defeat. Only Ethan Ford remained in the study. And everywhere, there were traces of Sophie Chen. The curtains she had chosen, The plants she had arranged, the design magazines on the bookshelf that he had never properly looked through. In the 3 months of searching, she had seemingly evaporated from the world. The vast emptiness and anxiety gnawed at him day and night. Until he came across the date marked with a red circle on the calendar, Sophie Chen's mother's death anniversary. He immediately knew. With Leo Ford, he waited early in the Forest Lawn Memorial Park. The next time he would return was 3 months later, on his mother's death anniversary. During this time, I traveled through 3 countries and attended countless art exhibitions. I sat on foreign streets, using my paintbrush to capture all sorts of people. No tedious housework, no family members to please. And most importantly, no constant pressure from the title of Mrs. Ford looming over me. I picked up my paintbrush again, pouring the inspiration from my travels into my designs. I sent my work out and surprisingly received offers from several companies. The Forest Lawn Memorial Park was quiet and solemn. I placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums before my mother's tombstone and gently brushed my fingers over her smiling face in the photo. Mom, I'm here to see you. I listened to your words. And I am free. Sophie Chen, a low, growling shout, filled with suppressed anger and complicated emotions, sounded from behind me. I stiffened for a moment before slowly turning around. Ethan Ford stood a few steps away, dressed in a suit, but his fatigue and tension were unmistakable. Beside him was Leo Ford, his eyes red and timidly looking at me. As expected, he had found me here. Ethan Ford strode forward and grabbed my wrist with surprising force. Where have you been these 3 months? Do you know? His words were abruptly cut off. Maybe it was because my gaze was too calm. His throat moved slightly, and I saw confusion stir in his eyes. He suddenly pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. His voice trembled slightly. Come back. At the same time, Leo Ford cried out, Mom, why don't you want me anymore? I miss you so much. That voice and embrace that once easily softened my heart only made me feel a deep exhaustion now. I slowly but firmly pushed Ethan Ford away. Then, I crouched down, looking calmly at my crying son. Sheehan, my voice was calm. You already have Lynn Auntie, who likes you more and is better, don't you? Leo Ford froze, his cry caught in his throat. Ethan Ford's face darkened, he took a deep breath, trying to soften his tone. His eyes swept over the tombstone. Sophie Chen, don't do this. If your mom were still here, she wouldn't want you drifting alone outside. She would want us to be a family of 3. She wants me to be free. I interrupted him, standing up and meeting his astonished gaze. My mom held my hand before she passed and said the thing she regretted most was that her illness dragged me down, binding me in a cold marriage. I looked at Ethan Ford, each word clear. She said she hoped I could break free from the chains and pursue true happiness. Ethan Ford was silent for a long time before hoarsely speaking. If that child hadn't been lost, would you have stayed? I looked at him, and that sense of bitter irony spread again in my heart. Maybe. My voice was soft. If the child were still here, I might have stayed for him, maybe for a few more years, 10 years, or even longer. I would have continued to endure, continued to play the obedient wife you needed. But Ethan Ford, that child's loss wasn't an accident. When my mother died, my whole world was collapsing. And I had to deal with your mother's unreasonable behavior, listen to our son's cold words, endure your indifference and neglect. My body and spirit broke down, and I couldn't save her. My voice was still calm, but with a sharp, painful analysis. Her departure made me realize completely that if I couldn't even love myself properly, I would never be able to love any child properly. Ethan Ford's face turned pale in an instant. He seemed to want to say something. His lips moved, but no sound came out. So, I'm not going back. I took one last look at my mother's tombstone, where the only person who had ever given me unconditional love now rested. I passed by Ethan Ford and Leo Ford, heading towards the Forest Lawn Memorial Park exit. My steps were unwavering. That night, I left the country again. I accepted an offer from a design company in Europe. No one here knew my past, and my colleagues only praised my creativity. For the first time, my worth had nothing to do with the title of Mrs. Ford. The new apartment I rented wasn't big, but it had great sunlight. I planted a few potted plants by the window, and on weekends, I would visit farmers' markets for old items or take my easel to the river to sketch. The days were simple, yet filled with a solid sense of control over my own life. I thought the farewell at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park was the end. Until one evening, I returned to my apartment building, holding fresh flowers and groceries. I saw those 2 familiar figures again. Ethan Ford, wearing casual Western attire, holding Leo Ford's hand, who was timidly looking at me. He quietly called out, "Mom." Ethan Ford stepped forward, his voice rare and cautious. "Sophie Chen, can we talk? Just for a while, over a cup of coffee." I looked at the careful, cautious look in his eyes and finally nodded. In the quiet cafe downstairs from my apartment. After we sat down, he carefully started speaking, offering what he thought were sincere terms. "I can gradually move the core business to Europe, and Leo Ford can go to school here and receive better education. The three of us can start over here." He looked at me, his eyes focused. "If you don't want to see my mother, don't want to deal with those social events, it's fine. Here, no one will disturb you. You can continue designing and live your own life and career." He spoke earnestly, with a tone of negotiation he had never shown before. I listened quietly, but inside, a huge, indescribable feeling of emptiness and irony surged. Once, on countless late nights when he came home late, on countless evenings when I cried alone after being criticized by his mother, in moments when I mourned my lost design opportunities, how I longed for him to sit down, like now, even if it was just to ask, "What's wrong today?" or to listen to me complain a little. But no, never once. If, on any day in these 7 years, even just once, he had said those words, showed me the slightest sign he was willing to understand, to change, I think I would have had the courage to hold on a little longer, to struggle a little longer in that suffocating marriage. But no. "Ethan Ford, it's too late." He froze, seemingly wanting to explain. I didn't give him the chance. "You see, now you understand, that marriage shouldn't be only me compromising." I looked at him, my eyes full of the exhaustion that comes after enduring so much. "But why, in all the times I needed you, silently asking for your help in those 7 years, did you never see it?" His throat moved, and he hoarsely said, "I was too busy." "Yes, you were busy, so I tried to be sensible, to play the wife who wouldn't cause you trouble, the wife you expected. But I also get tired, I get sad, and there were times I couldn't hold on." I stood up, calmly meeting his gaze. "I have already crawled out of that mire, so now, everything you're saying means nothing to me." I turned and left the cafe, leaving them both behind. The sunlight outside was perfect, falling on my shoulder as I walked alone, light and free. 3 years had passed, and my career as a designer in Europe finally reached its first shining moment. My work featured fabrics that had been torn and then re-sewn with golden thread, symbolizing fragmentation and rebirth. The colors shifted from the dark and oppressive to the bright and warm, much like my current state of mind. On the day of the finals, standing under the spotlight, I looked at the colleagues and audience from all over the world below, feeling a strange calm inside. "This series comes from a chapter of my life." My voice echoed through the microphone, reaching the whole venue. "I once thought my value lay in being a good wife and a perfect mother. I gave up my dreams, my paintbrush, even the chance to speak up." The audience fell silent. "Until I lost everything, I realized that a value tied to others is like a house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment." My gaze swept across the faces of many young women in the audience, my tone both firm and gentle. "Don't easily give up your dreams and career for anyone. Love and family can be the icing on the cake of life, but they should not be the foundation of your existence. Your world should be built by your own hands, vast and solid." The applause was deafening. I finally took home that heavy trophy. The spotlight flickered, capturing the glory of this moment, a glory that belonged only to Sophie Chen. Backstage, a large bouquet of pure white lilies quietly waited for me. Inside the bouquet was a card with no name, only a line of printed words. "Congratulations, you deserve it." This wasn't the first time. From the first time I won an award at a small salon exhibition, to my work being featured in magazines later on, there were always anonymous bouquets like this. First sunflowers, then lilies, and this time, lilies of the valley. I knew who it was from. Ethan Ford never appeared, but he and Leo Ford always participated in my life in this stubborn way. Occasionally, Leo Ford would send me emails, sharing snippets of his life. He had started junior high, was doing well in soccer, and his dad had taken him to Iceland to see the northern lights. Between the lines, there was a careful kind of flattery, no longer the unquestioned entitlement of the past. I didn't stop him, but I never responded. Some wounds have scabbed over, but that doesn't mean the flesh underneath has healed. The flowers they sent were a silent form of confession and observation. And I no longer needed this late-coming attention to validate my worth. At the celebration party after the awards, I met Julian Reed, a talented and somewhat stubborn architect. We argued passionately over the design concept of a public space, neither willing to back down. Miss Sue, your idea is too idealistic. It's structurally impossible. He frowned, his tone firm. Julian Reed, it's your thinking that's constrained by convention, I retorted without hesitation. The colleagues around us watched in disbelief, thinking we had become rivals. But it was in this sharp clash that we unexpectedly found a mutual passion and dedication to our profession. The argument turned into a deeper discussion. The differences became sparks of inspiration. He admired my boldness and spirit, and I admired his rigor and creativity. From work rivals, we gradually became colleagues who truly understood each other's dreams. 3 years later, Julian Reed and I held a simple wedding in a small church by the Mediterranean. There were no grandiose displays, no fake socializing, only friends and colleagues who truly wished us well. I wore a simple wedding dress I had designed myself, holding a bouquet of lilies of the valley I had grown myself. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass, casting mottled shadows on the floor. Julian Reed held my hand tightly, his eyes filled with love and support, unreserved. Just before exchanging vows, my gaze unintentionally swept across the back corner of the church. There sat 2 figures. Ethan Ford, dressed in a dark suit, thinner than I remembered, his demeanor deeper and more subdued. He quietly watched the ceremony, his expression complex, a mixture of loss and relief, finally settling into a deep, quiet peace. Ethan Ford thought back to many years ago, to the girl crying in the hospital corridor over her mother's medical bills. Remembering the tears that shone in her eyes when he put the ring on her finger at their wedding, tears he hadn't understood at the time. He recalled the countless moments he ignored, when she tried to get closer to him. Beside him was Leo Ford, now looking like a young man, his eyes free of the bitterness of childhood. Only a clear sense of admiration remained, along with a subtle trace of regret. He looked at Sophie Chen, in her white wedding dress, smiling brightly, as if for the first time truly seeing the woman who had once been his wife. On their laps was another bouquet of lilies of the valley. I wasn't surprised, and there was barely any ripple in my heart. I merely nodded at them, as I would to any other guest at the ceremony. Then, I turned and focused on Julian Reed, soon to be my husband. With clarity and determination, I said, I do. After the wedding, we took photos on the lawn outside the church with our 1-year-old daughter, Allison Reed. The little one stretched out her hands, trying to catch the butterflies fluttering around. She was the most precious gift life had given me after losing that child. An angel born of love and hope. Not far away, under the oak tree, Ethan Ford and Leo Ford silently watched the scene. Leo Ford watched Allison Reed, laughing as Julian Reed lifted her high, his eyes full of envy. If that little sister hadn't. Ethan Ford gently patted his son's shoulder, stopping him from finishing the sentence. His gaze lingered on Allison Reed. That vibrant, joyful little life, born into complete love, was like a mirror. It reflected the happiness he had once had but had destroyed with his own hands. He thought of Sophie Chen's pale face during the miscarriage, remembering his cold compensation at the time. A sharp, delayed pain twisted in his chest. He finally understood that the money she had desperately clung to was never for her own sake, but to help others. She had anonymously founded a scholarship foundation and helped countless girls in difficult situations. He had measured everything with money, and she, using the stink of money in his eyes, had nurtured countless seeds of hope. Later, Ethan Ford never remarried. He handed the Ford Group over to Leo Ford. He himself followed Sophie Chen's footsteps, slowly walking through the places she had traveled and worked, watching her designs reach greater heights. He silently, steadily continued doing charity under both their names, as if this was the only way to make up for something, to be a little closer to the person he had lost. During a charity project inspection in a remote mountainous area, he unexpectedly met the old headmaster who had been in charge of the Dawnlight Scholarship Foundation. The elderly man, with graying hair, recalled the past with vivid clarity. Sophie Chen, when she received the scholarship, cried and said she would repay this kindness one day. The old headmaster pushed up his glasses and smiled gently. Before she got married, she came to find me and asked about the Mr. Fu who established the fund. The old man chuckled, his wrinkles smoothing out with the smile. She said, she felt like she was about to get closer to him. Ethan Ford stood frozen. The wind in the mountains seemed to stop. He remembered that night after their wedding when she had looked at him with unspeakable tears in her eyes. He thought of the times she would secretly keep his discarded pens and his reaction when he found out. He remembered the countless moments he had ignored, when she tried to speak but hesitated. It turned out, she had not moved toward him just because of her mother's medical bills. She had moved toward him because that person was him. But it was too late. Now, all he could do was secretly collect her designs. Watching her step by step, climb higher and higher. Watching her with someone who truly cherished her. Watching her have the happiness he had once failed to protect. He was no longer her return. He was just a visitor, forever standing outside her happiness. He had once held the moon. But when he woke up, the moon had already run to him. Now the moon hung high in her own clear night sky.